Good morning and happy Labor Day. Today is Labor Day, which is a holiday that celebrates the protection of the worker, of the employee. At the end of the 19th century, when laws and unions were instituted to protect the rights of the worker and the working class. But believe it or not, in this week's Torah portion, we have the original labor union rights of the employee. In this week's Torah portion, Kitei say the Torah discusses laws given by God 3,300 years ago about the rights of a worker. In this week's Torah portion, it says if you hire a day laborer, Biyomo titein scharo, give him his pay at the end of the day. If he's a day laborer, he has to get paid that day. Do not delay his payment. And then the Torah goes on to say, before the sun even sets. Why, says the Torah? Because he is a poor man, and he is dependent on you for his sustenance. And do not allow him to cry out to God if you did not pay him. Then he'll cry to God and you will carry the sin. And there are many such laws in the Torah protecting the rights of workers. For example, the Torah says when someone works in your field, they're allowed to eat on the job. They're allowed to take from the food in the field to sustain themselves. However, while they're allowed to eat, they're not allowed to put it into their bag to take home for their family. But then there's a most interesting law protecting the rights of a laborer. The Torah says, and our rabbis teach us, that if a worker is working and it's the time for prayer, whether morning prayer or afternoon prayer, the Torah says the employee has the right to pray on the job, to interrupt his work and pray. However, the Torah says they should do an abbreviated version of prayer, not the lengthy entire prayer. And it's interesting to note, it's one thing to say give the man his pay, it's another thing to say let the man eat on the job. Why is prayer so essential that an employee is allowed to take time off his job in order to pray? Last night we had a great honor to host a former hostage by the name of Almog Meir John, who spent 8 months in captivity. And for over an hour he told us the riveting story of his life, his abduction, his captivity, and ultimately his freedom. Each story was more inspiring than the next. But the last thing that happened was the most incredible. He told us how he went to the Nova Festival. He was taken hostage. And he said for the first 2 weeks in captivity, all he could think is, how did this happen to me? How did I end up in this situation? He had just finished his military service after 3.5 years, and he was supposed to start a new job the next day in high tech. He said, but after 2 weeks in captivity, he said to himself, stop thinking how unlucky you are. Realize how lucky you are. You survived. You're alive. You have a family in Israel waiting for you that's going to fight for you every single day. Thank God that you're still here. And he started to become positive, and this gave him the strength to overcome captivity. Then he said that one day he took a piece of paper in captivity, and he decided to make a calendar. He made boxes along the paper, and he put Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then he wrote the date of that day and filled in all the dates. And he was able to draw 80 boxes on this page for 80 dates of a calendar. And in those dates, he put in his birthday, his family members' birthdays, anniversaries, anything he could remember to look forward to. And he said every day he would get up and do 3 things. He would start by saying, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. He would declare his faith in God. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one. And then he would thank God that he's alive and that he has a wonderful family that's waiting for him to come home and fighting for him. And then he would say out loud, today is the last day of my captivity. And he said he did this every single day. He said when it came to the last Friday, he looked and he saw he only had 5 more boxes on the page. And his friend who was with him in captivity said, your page is running out. What's going to be? You only have 5 more boxes. And he said, that's because by next Friday, I'm going to be home. The very next day, Operation Arnon took place. The IDF came and rescued him and his 2 friends from captivity. And he describes being taken to the helicopter and being airlifted to Israel. And he said as Gaza became smaller and smaller, as the helicopter flew up higher and higher, and Israel became larger and larger in his sight, the joy, the freedom he felt was something that was the happiest day of his life. But tragically, he came back to Israel, was reunited with his family, but then discovered that his father, who had been waiting for him to come home for 8 months, died of a heart attack, of a broken heart, the night before he came home, just hours before he arrived. And he said, this was the happiest and the saddest day of my life. And he said, once again, I said to myself, how could this be? I'm free. Everything's supposed to be good now. And now my father died. And then he said to himself, just like he did in captivity, why are you focusing on the negative? Thank God I'm home. I'm with my family. Thank God I could attend my father's funeral, which he did the very next day. He said, thank God that I'm blessed to at least be here, to mourn my family, my father with my family. And he taught us how to always seek the positive in every circumstance. At the end of the talk, there was questions and answers. And someone said, what can we do to help the situation in Israel and the hostages? And amongst other things, he said, everyone should pray for the hostages. Take one hostage and pray for that hostage every day for them to come home. That's what you can do. And suddenly a woman in the audience raised her hand and came up, said, I have to tell you something. When the hostages were taken, I received an email from an organization that said, we're asking everyone to take one hostage and keep them in your prayers every single day. And I responded and I said, I would love to do that. Of course I can do that. And they sent me a hostage that I should pray for. And which hostage did they send me? Almog Meir John. Your name, with your picture, with your Hebrew name. And every day in captivity, since October 7th, I prayed for you to come home. And she said, when I heard the news that you were rescued, she said, I broke down sobbing. I couldn't stop crying, tears of joy that you came home. And I came here tonight to meet you in person. Almog got off the stage, and in the most emotional reunion, they hugged and embraced, which seemed for eternity, with such love and gratitude. And that moment showed us the bond, the connection between the Jewish people worldwide, but it also showed us the power of prayer. Yes, the employee has rights to get paid on time, to be able to eat on the job, but also to pray, to take care of their spiritual needs. That's part of the labor laws of the Torah. Have a happy Labor Day.